Well, hello there. How's it going? Welcome to my little video series that I call Crime Dive. My name is Crystal Sky, and if you're anything like me, you find yourself drawn to true crime cases. So, yeah, that's what I talk about. If you like true crime, and you also want to feel better about your makeup skills, you should totally like, subscribe, and come hang out with me every Tuesday, where I will take a deep dive look into a true crime case while slapping on the old clown paint. Oh man, I know I've complained about my skin the last couple days, but I just got done from a trip to Washington. I had to monitor my dad. He had some minor surgery, so went up there to monitor him afterwards and stuff. And man, my skin does not travel well. It hates the hot weather and it hates traveling. So my lord, it is super dry and super red. Ugh. Anyway, before we get into today's case, also wanted to thank anyone and everyone who has commented on my videos. I am slowly getting through them. I know I'm terrible at responding. I do respond, I promise. I get so sucked up into doing research and editing and everything else, just life. And so, yeah, sometimes I do forget to check my comments. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much. And again, remember, if you have cases that you want to recommend to me, please go ahead and list them down below. I love taking case suggestions. And speaking of case suggestions, just like last week's video, well, this week's and next week's, because it's another two-parter, is a case suggestion that I received from one of you. So thank you so much. And I actually forgot to look up the person's name before I sat down to film. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a clip of after I'm done, because I need to go to my computer and find your name. I totally forgot to bring it with me before I sat down to record. So sorry. So let's go ahead and do that. So quick shout out to Heather Petty. Thank you so much for recommending this case to me. I got totally absorbed, as obviously it's a two-parter. So just wanted to say thank you so much, Heather. I totally appreciate when you guys give me cases. I love researching these cases. You guys have given me some really good ones that are coming down the pipeline, all right? I promise. So thank you again, Heather. I totally appreciate it. Okay, yeah, so yeah, wanted to make sure I give you guys a shout out, because I truly do appreciate when you give me case suggestions, because I have been introduced to some just wild and complex ones, and it's just been really interesting doing the research on them. So after all of that, let's talk about today's case. So like I said, it's another two-parter, so this is part one, and today's case is one that I am sure you've heard of. I remember being vaguely aware of this case, and I've never really taken a deep dive look into it. There are a ton of, true crime series that have covered this stuff, like in the vein of like 2020 Dateline, numerous like investigation discovery shows and the like that. So the only exposure I've really had of this case was through those shows. And man, you cannot cram this case into like a 15, 20, 30, 45 minute program. There's no way, because there's so much. I read a book for this case. Again, I love when there's cases that have books. I love it. There's so much information you get. And I was reading this book and was introduced to so many details, so many, just complexities that I was not aware of, Like when you watch really complex cases, which, a lot of them are, frankly, because human beings are complex, it's really hard to sum that up in, like I said, a 20, 30, 45 minute program. So I always just heard like general overview, of what happened. And man, after reading the book, reading this case, really doing some deep dive into it, man, no wonder it is, sort of like, I guess, infamous would be the word to use, I guess. Today, we are talking about the brutal, awful murder and torture of Shanda Sharer. Yeah, I'm sure you have heard of her. She was only 12 years old, guys. A little baby, a little girl. And to make matters even worse, the perpetrators were her peers, girls who were around her age, maybe a few years older. I believe the oldest was 17. So it's just a messed up one today. This is part one. So part one is going to be a lot of setup, all right? There are 6 main people to go over in this case, all right? 6. That's including Shanda, and that's a lot of information information to get into. So for part 1 today, we're going to get into setup, all right? Who these people were, these girls were, how they came into each other's lives, and we will end with a setup to the night of the murder. And then part 2 next week will cover the murder, the trials, it's really awful. So for part 1 today, there's not too much disclaimer-wise. There's nothing too graphic or anything, because again, we're not going to be covering the actual crime today. We're just doing events leading up to it. But yeah, the general content of this case is, it's the death of a 12-year-old. So it is like some heavy stuff. Some people get super sensitive when it's cases involving children. So did wanna warn ya. And yeah, I guess without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the case of Shanda Sharer. So Shanda Renee Sharer, all right? She was born June 6th, 1979 at Pineville County Hospital in Pineville, Kentucky. Her parents were Stephen and Jacqueline Sharer. Now, Shanda and Jacqueline, her mother had a very, very special bond. Her mother described her as her, quote, little buddy. And it is said that Shanda just, quote, adored her father as well. So she had a pretty good relationship with her parents. Shanda also had an older half-sister named Paige. I hope that's how you pronounce that. Paije. But this was from Jacqueline's first marriage. And this had been to her high school sweetheart, Mike Boardman. And yeah, they had had a daughter, Shanda's older half-sister, Paige. Yeah, Jacqueline and Mike were only together for a few years. I think like 3, 4, 5 years, somewhere around there. And then they, got divorced. Shanda's parents ended up getting divorced when she was about 7 years old. And it was at this time that Jacqueline and Shanda moved to Louisville, Kentucky. After Shanda's parents had divorced, Jacqueline had remarried a man named Ronnie Ott. And after she married him, her and Shanda moved to Louisville, Kentucky. I think Paige was with them at this time. I cannot remember if she was already out of the house at this time. I forgot, but I think she was with them. Now, while in Louisville, Shanda would attend the 4th, 5th, and 6th grades at St. Paul's Catholic School. Now, this was a very small Catholic school where Shanda received above average grades. She was a cheerleader on the gymnastics team, was part of the 4-H club, the Girl Scouts, and played on the softball, basketball, and volleyball teams. There didn't seem to be enough time to do all the things Shanda wanted to do. She was a very, very active young girl. It is said that she really, really flourished here and in this environment, in this like small school environment at St. Paul's. She really flourished. She had lots of friends. Her favorite color was lavender. She was always smiling, loved to read, enjoyed being the center of attention, just really had a bubbly, outgoing personality. Now, like I said, St. Paul's was a Catholic school and was very much your traditional, stereotypical Catholic school in that students wore uniforms. They raised their hands to be addressed in class, and there was respect given to the teachers. It was a very like strict, formal type of environment. Now, when Jacqueline divorced Ronnie after 4 years of marriage, her and Shanda ended up moving to New Albany, Kentucky. And this was to be closer to Shanda's father, Stephen, who had remarried at this point to a woman named Sharon Smith. Stephen and Sharon lived with Sharon's 2 kids, her 15-year-old son, Larry Dale, and 18-year-old daughter, Sandy, and they lived near Jeffersonville. Now, when Shanda and Jacqueline moved to New Albany, at this time, Paige, who was 19 years old, she was living with Jacqueline's older sister in an apartment complex in New Albany, and that apartment complex is where Jacqueline and Shanda ended up moving, and they were like in an apartment right across the way from her sister. Now, at this point, both of Shanda's parents were on pretty friendly terms, and they did co-parent together. Shanda visited her father like every weekend. And like I said, she just had a really good relationship with them. After the move to New Albany, did I say New Albany, Kentucky? I meant New Albany, Indiana. I'm not sure now if I said New Albany, Kentucky. I'll find out when I put this in post. But yeah, just for the record, New Albany, Indiana. Sorry, it's been a very, very long couple days. I'm very tired. So after moving to New Albany in the summer of 1991, I believe it was like June, in the fall, that meant that Shanda was going to be going to a new school. And that would be Hazelwood Middle School. Now, this was a large public school, and I mean large. Like, it had more students enrolled in the 7th and 8th grades there than St. Paul's had in its entire student population, all right? So it was a very, very big school. And in August of 1991, Shanda would enter the 7th grade at this large public school. Yeah, quite a culture shock, I'm sure, right? After being at this small, tight-knit, strict kind of formal community with her old school. Whereas, at this large public school, right, it's very informal. There ain't no uniforms, there's no like raising your, like, it's a little bit more chaos, right? There's no like raising your hand in class and like, this like strict respect given to teachers and whatnot. Like, you attend to public school, so quite a culture shock for little Shanda, all right? And remember, she's 12, and God, man, you remember those ages. Like, it sucks. You've got puberty, you've got just all kinds of hormones, and then you've got like, politics at school, like we've all seen Mean Girls, all right, and stuff like that. We all know how it is. It's just, I don't know, for me, I did not enjoy that time in my life. And yeah, Shanda was feeling the anxieties of it, like entering this large public school. The night before her first day, Jacqueline said that she and Shanda probably spent like 3 hours just painstakingly picking out her outfit for the next day. Like, Shanda, she was really nervous. She was nervous about making friends, and she wanted to look good. And Shanda was just really worried she wasn't going to make any friends. She was actually one of the youngest students at the school, and that really worried her, really bothered her. And though it is said that she was like more mature, than peers her age, she still really like looked her age, she looked like a 12-year-old. And so Shanda went to great lengths to make herself appear older. She one time wrote in her diary, quote, "I love my mom very much, but she doesn't understand how much I want to be 13 and have people spend the night on school nights. I can't talk on the phone past 10. At everybody else's house I can, but not here." Though, yeah, she did reiterate how much she loved her mother and stuff. It was just, those typical growing pains, right? You're in such a hurry to grow up, right? You just want to be part of the crowd. You just want to be part of the in crowd. You want to be accepted, and you're just in a hurry to be an adult and enter that world, right? So like I said, Shanda was obsessed with looking older, and so yeah, she went to great lengths to achieve this. She wore like certain jeans that really complimented her figure, for example. She applied her makeup very carefully and styled her hair until it was just right. Remember, this is 1991, so of course there was lots of hairspray involved. And yeah, this seemed to have a pretty good effect where Shanda started to, appear older due to this. Now, it is said when she started Hazelwood, the first 2 days actually went pretty well. She told her mother all about her first couple of days. She said that she loved all of her teachers and that she had even made a few friends. Yeah. But then on the third day in Hazelwood, is when the beginning of some very major changes would happen for Shanda. So on her third day at Hazelwood, Jacqueline got a call. She got a call from the school. Shanda had been involved in a fight. So one of the girls that Shanda had started to make friends with, right, wanted to break up with her boyfriend, which was a boy named Nathan, and she wanted to give him back like his little promise ring or class ring or whatever it was, and she was very like, nervous about it and stuff because, she's wanting to break things off and be done with it. And Shanda, of course, wanting to prove that she's a good friend and, wanting to be there, was like, "Hey, I'll go ahead and give this back to Nathan for you, no problem." So yeah, that's what Shanda did, all right? She found Nathan and gave him back the ring. And when she did, wow, Nathan did not take it too kindly. He was very, very offended. He demanded to know why Shanda's friend wasn't giving this back herself and like who the hell Shanda even was. Like, who are you? Like, why are you even butting into my business? It was like very hostile attitude. He was not taking this well. And he started just, going off on her, causing people to start to stop and stare, So yeah, things were escalating pretty quickly. And as he's, going off on her, telling her to butt out and all that, a 14-year-old girl enters. She intervenes and gets in between Shanda and Nathan. And this 14-year-old girl was Amanda Heavrin. Turns out, Amanda here, she's Nathan's cousin. So, she's not here to help Shanda. She is not here to help Shanda. She was Nathan's cousin. She confronted Shanda and told her that she shouldn't be interrupting into people's business where she didn't belong, etc., etc. And she pushed Shanda. Yeah, she got physical with Shanda. Amanda pushed Shanda, pushed her like with her chest, which knocked Shanda against like the whole row of lockers. So she got knocked up against a row of lockers. And Amanda then threw Shanda to the ground. And before Shanda could do anything, Amanda was on top of her, just punching her. One of these punches landed in Shanda's face, and it actually caused her head to like smack the ground. Yeah. So teacher ended up breaking up the fight, but not before Shanda got a nasty bump on her head and a scratch on her face. Now, because this is school and this is just, they don't care about bullying, both Amanda and Shanda were given in-class detention. Yeah, in-class detention for 1 week, which I'm sorry, like, I think that's totally messed up. Like, Shanda did nothing wrong. Amanda was the aggressor. She physically assaulted her. I do not understand why Shanda was also punished. I think that is completely messed up. And it's yet another reason in a long list of reasons why I could not be a parent, because I would be extremely upset. Now, Shanda had never been in trouble before, all right? Like, that wasn't her character. She didn't even know what in-class detention was. She was like, what the hell is that? I don't even know what that is. While Amanda was just kind of, sitting there being very smug and smiling and cocky, while they were in the office. She had been through this before. Oh, and here's the kicker. Jacqueline even punished Shanda as well. Yeah, she punished her daughter for getting into a fight, which I don't get. She said that it was her daughter's responsibility not to get into fights. And it's like, she didn't get into a fight. She was literally pushed down and assaulted. Like, she didn't even get a chance to defend herself. I don't know. I think that was the wrong call. I would certainly not be punishing my child. Like I said, I'd be up at that school raising all kinds of hell. Now, while serving their 1 week in school detention together, Amanda and Shanda actually became friends. Yes, the enemies became friends. And a few days after their detention had ended, that would be the first time Jacqueline was introduced to Amanda. The two girls had been hanging out at Shanda's house on the front porch. And right away, Jacqueline wasn't a huge fan of Amanda. First of all, she was upset that Shanda had someone over when she wasn't at home, when she was at work, so she didn't like that. She didn't really like that Amanda was 14 and trying to hang out with her 12-year-old daughter. That kind of rubbed her the wrong way. And this is gonna sound really kind of messed up here in 2022, but remember, this is 1991 and we are in Indiana. Sharon did not like Amanda's appearance. You see, Amanda, she had a very tomboyish look about her, and she was actually often mistaken for a boy, and she really leaned into this look, so she was just kind of one of those, masculine looking people, and she really leaned into that. And yeah, Jacqueline wasn't exactly thrilled that her daughter was hanging out with this person. She tried telling her daughter, like, hey, this person, like, physically assaulted you. Like, you really want to hang out with someone like that? And Shanda just, assured her mom, like, no, Mom, you don't understand. She's just misunderstood, all right? You just need to give her a chance. She's misunderstood, because Shanda was just that type. And so Jacqueline did allow her daughter to, be friends with Amanda. Now, we'll get a little bit into Amanda here. So Amanda, she lived with her father, Jerry Heffrin, and her older sister, and they lived in New Albany. And they lived in a poor neighborhood compared to Shanda and Jacqueline. Amanda's mother had actually abandoned the family a few years earlier, leaving Amanda and her sister to be raised by their father. Academically, Amanda was not a great student. It is said she did often struggle with her schoolwork, but she was a gifted athlete, and she actually played on the Hazelwood basketball team. Now, when interacting with adults, Amanda's demeanor was very sort of quiet, reserved, and polite. However, her demeanor towards her peers was definitely more aggressive. She walked the halls with like a certain swagger, often wore, baggy jeans and a sweatshirt, a baseball cap. And I said earlier, was often mistaken for a boy. She really leaned into that appearance and really leaned into, her masculine side. She had, a very strong masculine side that she really embraced and that she really, enjoyed being. Now, by the time 14-year-old Amanda met 12-year-old Shanda, Amanda had already sort of discovered her sexuality. She had already kind of come to that crossroads in her life, and she discovered that she was gay, that she preferred women. Now, of course, this is 1991, and we are in Indiana, so Amanda did take great efforts to hide her sexuality from her family and from her father. And as she got older and she started leaning more into like her boyish appearance, her father did start questioning her, like, hey, like, are you gay? Like, I've never noticed you have a boyfriend. And so she actually had one of her guy friends pose as her boyfriend to like kind of get him off her back a little bit. Now, it is said that 14-year-old Amanda had dated girls before, all right? And she actually had an on-again, off-again relationship with a 15-year-old girl named Melinda Loveless. And we're going to get a little bit into Melinda here, into Amanda's girlfriend here, Melinda, all right? So Melinda D. Loveless was born October 28th, 1975 in New Albany, Indiana. Her parents were Marjorie Donahue and Larry Loveless. Melinda was the youngest of 3 daughters, and her sisters' names was Michelle and Melissa. Now, Melinda here actually came from a pretty troubled, turbulent, abusive, chaotic upbringing. So her father, Larry, had been drafted into the army during Vietnam, and afterward, he worked on and off for the Southern Railway, and I guess his job, whatever he did, allowed him to sort of like work whenever whenever was convenient for him, kind of like, I guess, set his own hours. But in 1965, Larry changed careers and became a probationary officer. And this was with the New Albany Police Department, but he only lasted there 8 months. So he was fired. And why? Because Officer Loveless here and his partner beat an innocent black man who Larry had accused of sleeping with his wife. Yeah, so he was fired. Now, this was a funny, actually, accusation for Larry to make here because Larry is into some pretty interesting, kinky stuff here. Again, not to kink shame, but it was just kind of funny that Larry here was accusing someone else of sleeping with his wife when he himself was a serial cheater, often wore his wife and daughter's underwear, enjoyed wearing makeup, and had a thing for watching his wife with other men and women, which also made him jealous at the same time. So yeah, Larry definitely has some issues here. Again, not because of the kinks that he's in, but just it's just like, bro, okay, so if like, you're into, watching your wife do that or whatever, you can't like then be jealous and be all like aggressive and mean. Like, yeah, Larry obviously has some issues. Additionally, all right, to make matters a little more chaotic, from 1980 to 1982, the Loveless family were deeply involved with Graceland Baptist Church. And when they had joined, Larry and Marjorie had been baptized, given full confessions, and had sworn off drinking. Larry actually became a Baptist lay preacher, and then after that became a marriage counselor for the church. And Marjorie ended up becoming the church nurse. However, Larry was accused of being too forward with his female patients, big shock. And there were some other questionable things that happened. We don't really know a whole lot. One time, I know when Melinda was a child, she was taken to a hotel room with a 50-year-old man for a 5-hour exorcism. Not sure what that entails. Don't know if I want to know. Now, the Loveless family did end up leaving this church, but this was only after Larry had attempted to sexually assault one of his female patients. Yeah, that was when they left. In 1988, Larry had a brief stint as a mail courier, but he quit after only 3 months. And he actually did really little work while he was there and actually often brought home mail to like destroy at home. Now, Marjorie, Melinda's mother, she had worked on and off since 1974, and it said that when both parents were working, the Loveless family was, pretty decently well off, and they even lived in the upper middle-class suburb of Floyd's Knobs, Indiana. However, it is said that Larry often did not share his paycheck and finances with his family. He usually spent his money very impulsively, as if he was a teenager. He especially loved to buy himself guns, motorcycles, and all kinds of cars. Now, members of the extended Loveless family reported that the girls would often come to their homes hungry because they hadn't been properly fed. So yeah, it's just not a great environment for Melinda. Larry did end up filing for bankruptcy in 1980. And of course, to, top off the douchebag Sunday that is Larry Loveless, he was of course abusive to his family. I mentioned a little bit earlier, right, when he got fired as a police officer for beating an innocent black man. His physical violence, of course, included his family. It is said both Larry and Marjorie would visit the bars in Louisville, where Larry would paint himself as someone else, usually as a doctor or a dentist, and pass Marjorie off as his girlfriend. He would also share Marjorie with his friends. And look, man, again, like if you're into that, totally cool, dude. Like more power to you, right? But Marjorie wasn't really into this. She found it disgusting and degrading, and she was just not in a healthy environment. And this lifestyle that Larry forced her to live really affected her mental health. And Marjorie would continuously attempt suicide all throughout Melinda's childhood. One time during an orgy with another couple at the house, afterwards, Marjorie had gone into the restroom and tried to kill herself. To make matters worse, when Melinda was 9 years old, Larry had Marjorie sexually assaulted in succession by his friends. And after this, Marjorie attempted to drown herself. And after this, Marjorie refused to have sex with Larry for about a month before he finally just forced her. And he sexually assaulted her. And during this assault, all of the children, including Melinda, were home, and they did hear it occur. Another physical violent incident happened in the summer of 1986. Marjorie said that she didn't want Larry to go home with 2 women he had found at the bar. And in retaliation, Larry beat Marjorie to the point that she had to go to the hospital. This incident did cause Larry to be charged charged, and he was charged and convicted of battery. Now, the extent of Larry's abuse towards his daughters is, I guess, not exactly totally 100% known. There are various court testimonies that state that he fondled Melinda and fondled her as young as an infant. There are court testimonies and reports that said that he had molested Marjorie's 13-year-old younger sister, and this was when her and Larry had first been married. He then, it is said, molested that girl's cousin, who was a little boy named Teddy, and it is said that he molested Teddy from the ages of 10 to 14. In court, Teddy testified, and he testified to an incident in which Larry had tied up all three of his daughters and had sexually assaulted them in succession. However, I guess none of the Loveless sisters, including Melinda, have verified Teddy's account, although both of Melinda's older sisters did say that their father did molest them. But Melinda had never admitted that this happened to her. And that's probably because, I think her dad probably groomed her, I'm sure. She actually slept in the same bed as her father until she was 14. And that only stopped because that is when Larry just up and abandoned his entire family. In addition to being sexually abusive and being, like a pedophile freak, Larry was also, of course, verbally and mentally abusive to his children and wife. I guess Michelle, one of Melinda's older sisters, said that when she was 7, he fired a gun, in her direction, purposely close to her, purposely missing her to, scare her. I guess he would also embarrass his children by, grabbing their underwear and, smelling it in front of people and in front of other family members. Yeah, dude has some serious issues. I guess one time in November of 1990, Marjorie caught Larry spying on Melinda and one of her young friends. And I guess this enraged Marjorie, and she attacked Larry with a knife. Now, Larry ended up being sent to the hospital for self-defense injuries after he had attempted to grab the blade out of her hand, while Marjorie then attempted suicide again, and her daughters had to call the police. And it was apparently after this incident that Larry had filed for divorce and left the family. Other reports say that it was actually Marjorie who had filed for the divorce. But either way, this is when they split up. Now, it is said Melinda was especially devastated when her father Larry took off. And it was at this point, after the divorce, that Larry, just straight up abandoned the family and moved to Avon Park, Florida. Meanwhile, Marjorie had 3 children to raise on her own, and she was a nurse at Floyd Memorial Hospital. And she struggled to make ends meet, but within a year of her divorce, Marjorie had remarried. And she had remarried a man named Mike Donahue, and with, the addition of his income, they were able to actually provide a pretty stable life for Marjorie and her daughters. Well, at this point, it was just Melinda and her older sister her older sister Melissa. Michelle had already moved out of the house at this point. Now, it is said that Melinda felt especially devastated after her father had left and abandoned the family, and had felt even more abandoned after he had remarried, because, he'd moved to Florida and remarried and had started a new family. He would sporadically write to Melinda, of course, kind of playing on her trauma and her emotions and stuff. Of course, he's a professional groomer, before he finally just up and cut contact altogether with her. And this, of course, left Melinda with just all kinds of abandonment issues. She felt totally and utterly abandoned. She began acting out, getting into fights at school and physical altercations, which just became very, very physical, very violent and angry. She reported being depressed, struggled academically, and actually had to repeat a grade in school. I'm not sure which, but this caused her to then be the oldest kid in her class. She was resentful of Mike, her new stepdad, who did try to reach out and be supportive, but she just pushed him away. And Melinda was just in her downward spiral. She developed a real violent streak, kind of developed that kind of reputation, it's kind of like the violent bullying girl. And even though materialistically, she was well provided for, she mentally and emotionally was struggling intensely with abandonment issues, depression, and, again, not to excuse her behavior, because again, it doesn't matter what you're going through. You don't get to physically take it out on people who have nothing to do with it. You know what I mean? You don't get to physically assault someone because you have some trauma, but it helps explain, right, why she's so violent and acting out. She has a lot of baggage, guys, a lot of baggage. And then especially with the whole abandonment issue, I mean, that's even more complicated when you add in the fact that, Larry groomed her. And if he molested his 2 other daughters who they admitted it, of course he molested Melinda. Let's go. Look, I mean, come on. Give me a break. I mean, she slept in the same bed as him up until he abandoned the family at 14. So, like, not only do you have the issue of, like, your parent, your father, who's supposed to love you unconditionally, abandoning you, you also have the, you know, icky, like, groomer aspect. And Melinda was just really suffering at this point. She was definitely at an all-time low. Now, Melinda didn't just act out by getting into physical confrontations with people. She also acted out by being sexually active. Yes. And it is said by the time she was 15, she had had some sexual experiences with boys and kind of discovered it wasn't really her thing, you know? It wasn't really her thing. And she actually was gay. She actually preferred women. And apparently it is said that Melinda's two older sisters, they were also gay. And in 1990, that is when Melinda met Amanda and the two began dating. Now, Michelle, Melinda's older sister, she thought her sister was too young to be dating anyone. She didn't care if it was male or female or what. She thought Melinda was too young. But Melinda told her no, it was fine, that Amanda actually reminded her of their father. And she really liked Amanda. Yeah, creepy. Like, Melinda here is definitely got some issues. So the next year, in March of 1991, Melinda came out to her mother. It is said that her mother had some questions about, like, some hickeys that she saw on Melinda's neck, and that is when Melinda confessed to her that she was gay. Now, it is said Marjorie was very upset at first, and she was very angry that all three of her children ended up gay, but it is said that eventually she did come around and, like, accept it. Now, both Amanda and Melinda, I guess they were pretty kind of open and brazen with the relationship. Remember, this is the early 1990s. We're in Indiana, a very conservative area. And yeah, it's not like you saw a bunch of gay couples out and about, public and proud anyway, right, during this time. But Melinda and Amanda, they were out there very brazen about the relationship. They would hold hands, kiss. Like, it was very obvious that they were, you know, girlfriends. And it is said everyone at Hazelwood knew that they were together. Now, they would be, of course, harassed and accosted and, you know, just like bullied for, you know, who they were at this time by their peers. But they always stood their ground. They did not take no guff. I guess one time Melinda actually sprayed a boy in the face with mace who he had been, like, harassing Amanda and giving them a hard time. And so she just straight up, like, shot him with mace. Now, this was a pretty serious, intense, emotional relationship for both Amanda and Melinda, all right? It was a pretty serious for both of them. However, as the year progressed and the relationship grew, it began deteriorating, all right? So Melinda, because she has a lot of abandonment issues and whatnot, on top of a whole myriad of other issues, Melinda was very, very jealous and controlling and possessive. And on more than one occasion had even physically assaulted and slapped Amanda because she thought Amanda was, like, looking or checking out another girl. Yeah, she was toxic. And this behavior, of course, really started to wear Amanda down. She started not really enjoying being with Melinda anymore, and I don't really blame her. So yeah, that was the status of Amanda and Melinda's relationship when Amanda came across Shanda and they had their detention together. Now, at first, Melinda didn't think much about Amanda's 1 week in class detention. You know, they had both gotten it before and it wasn't, you know, no big thing. And Amanda had even bragged how she had given the new girl a beating, you know, so she didn't really think anything of it when Amanda got detention. However, during the week of detention, Amanda informed Melinda that her and Shanda had actually made up, that the new girl actually wasn't that bad. In fact, she was pretty cool. And in fact, to Melinda, it seemed like that's all Amanda could talk about was Shanda this and Shanda that. And we know Melinda is possessive, controlling, has fear of abandonment and all kinds of issues, decided to find out for herself just who was this Shanda person, what was going on with her and her girlfriend. And so during the week that Shanda and Amanda had their their in-class detention, one day of the week, Melinda purposely showed up to school late so that she would then get assigned detention. And so she could just see, you know, what's going on here. And when Melinda saw pretty, bubbly, just all around, like, cute, gorgeous Shanda and saw how Amanda was staring at her, she instantly grew jealous and rageful. She was very jealous how Amanda stared at Shanda and smiled at her, how Shanda smiled back. Very jealous how the two exchanged notes, even brazenly right in front of her. And after detention, Amanda and Shanda had actually walked out together. You know, they were all giggling and, you know, all that stuff. And though Melinda smiled, all right, when Amanda introduced her to Shanda, inside, she had a very, very quiet rage going. So after school, Melinda and Amanda walked to Melinda's house. They went into Melinda's bedroom, and here is where Melinda confronted Amanda. She had seen Amanda stuff some notes from Shanda in like her top pocket of her shirt, and she like instantly tried to get them from Amanda. But when Amanda like put up a struggle and tried to get her, like had tried to prevent her from grabbing the notes, Melinda slapped her across the face. She demanded to know what Amanda was hiding from her. Now, Melinda did manage to get the notes, and she would later say, quote, "One from Shanda said she thought Amanda was cute. Stuff like that. I told Amanda to stay away from Shanda. I told her I didn't think it was right, you know? I said, just tell the little girl that we're together. We've been together for 2 years, and just leave it at that." But Amanda would not leave it at that. Now, at first, Shanda and Amanda were just friends. Just spending time together, exchanging notes. This was in the days before text messages, kids. They'd talk on the phone, like your typical friend stuff. And like I said earlier, right, Jacqueline wasn't exactly thrilled at this friendship. We went over this earlier. She didn't like how much older Amanda was, didn't really like her appearance, and yeah, the whole thing just kind of rubbed her the wrong way. But she knew how much her, daughter wanted to make friends, knew how much that her daughter just, really wanted people to feel welcomed and stuff. So yeah, she let the friendship progress, even though she thought Amanda was, quote, a rough type. Now, eventually, this friendship between Amanda and Shanda would grow to beyond that and grow a little more intimate and physical. So in the notes that they were exchanging, they slowly progressed into more intimate stuff. So some of the notes that Amanda wrote to Shanda asked things like, quote, "Do you kind of in a way like girls? If so, I think it's so cool because it's so different. Is that why you're so nice to me? Do you think I'm cute or something? Please tell me the truth. I won't laugh because I think it's cool." Yeah, so Amanda is definitely prodding, right? She's definitely prodding and seeing what how Shanda's feeling. And I am just going to reiterate that Amanda is 14 while Shanda is 12. So even though Shanda was only 12, she had started, exploring that next phase in life, right? Where you start noticing maybe the opposite sex, or maybe in some cases the same sex, or maybe not at all. She had kind of reached that point a little bit where she started sort of noticing that kind of part of herself. And so, she was actually one of the first girls at St. Paul's to actually start, dating, which, at that age meant just kind of nightly phone calls and holding hands and stuff, Shanda had never really been shy, she's a very outgoing, bubbly personality. Her friends at St. Paul's described her as, quote, boy crazy. She had kissed boys at this point, but remember, she's only 12 and she hadn't really done, I don't think she had done any make out open mouth kissing, but she was just at that point, she hadn't really started thinking about her sexuality, or let alone homosexuality. She had no members of the LGBT community in her sphere. She was at the point where she was just stepping out into this next phase. You know what I mean? She was just at that point. Whereas, remember, Amanda, she's 14. She's already knows what her sexuality is, has already sort of explored that part of herself. And yeah, you might say, well, 2 years difference. Yeah, but these are pivotal, significant ages, right? And the difference between a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old is pretty significant. Now, since Melinda was, of course, jealous and physically abusive, Amanda took pains to hide her friendship/relationship with Shanda. Now, through her notes to Shanda, kind of like the one that I read to you earlier, kind of through this, she started slowly, coming out to Shanda and, prodding her, even kind of nudging the relationship into a more intimate one, And over the course of just a couple of weeks, Amanda's notes to Shanda just kind of stopped beating around the bush and were just kind of blunt. She started with things like, quote, "I have a lot in store Friday or Saturday when I see you. Do you know what I mean? I'm just joking. Or do you want me not to joke?" And then, it progressed to just being, more direct with notes like, quote, "Last night, I meant everything I said to you about making love to you. Shanda, you're so beautiful, hot, and sexy. I want you. I can't say it enough." Now, it is said that there was something that kind of drew Shanda to Amanda. And yeah, over the course of these few weeks, their relationship, did kind of turn to an intimate one. So after about 3 weeks after they had first met, Amanda invited Shanda over to her house to spend the night. Now, Jacqueline, of course, was completely oblivious to what was going on. So, of course, she, gave her blessing, was like, yeah, go for it. And it is said, in the seclusion of Amanda's bedroom, Amanda and Shanda had sex, or at least some sort of significant, intimate physical contact. Now, although the experience seemed to be, enjoyable for Amanda, based on notes that were exchanged, it seems that Shanda was kind of having mixed feelings. In a note that she wrote to Shanda, Amanda said, quote, "Shanda, I really had a great time with you last night, and I'm looking forward to more. Please don't cry anymore, okay?" But by the next day, this seemed to have kind of been forgotten because Shanda had written back to Amanda, and based on what she wrote back to Amanda, it kind of seems that, maybe she was kind of scared and didn't know how to feel at first, but I don't know, she seemed to be at least coming around if you're, gonna judge what she wrote to Amanda. She wrote, quote, "Amanda, I loved last night too. I want more too, and always. I want what we had last night, if you want." I just feel so sorry for Shanda here, she's got this, older, more experienced girl, kinda, it's bringing up some questions of her own sexuality, and, it's not like today. She can't go and, Reddit, you know what I mean, and find people who have maybe been in this similar situation, She was completely alone, and I can't even begin to imagine the complicated, nuanced, complex emotions that Shanda was going through at this time, she's only 12, and, man, that age, puberty sucks, all right? Being a teenager and all that, it sucks. And, man, I just feel really sorry that, Shanda didn't have anyone to really, talk to, I mean, she did have friends, right? But, most of her good friends were back at St. Paul's. And then, the few friends that she had made at Hazelwood had actually started distancing themselves from Shanda when she began hanging out with Amanda. So, yeah, she was all alone. There was one friend that I guess Shanda was able to confide in, and this was a girl named Michelle Durham, and she lived in Jeffersonville near Shanda's father, and so Shanda saw her every weekend. And one of these times that Shanda was with Michelle, she made a little confession. Michelle said that Shanda told her one day that she had, quote, done things with a girl, and that she didn't want Amanda to, quote, be scared of her or, quote, think badly of her because of it, which is just so heartbreaking. And though she did admit to doing things with Amanda, she told Michelle that she wasn't sure she was a lesbian. She said Amanda, quote, says we're lesbians, but I don't feel that way. I must be bisexual because I really like guys more. Now, Shanda didn't say or confide any more than that. And yeah, there are many of Shanda's friends and family who feel that Amanda, who was older, more sexually mature, sort of pressured Shanda into a relationship. They said that Shanda, wanted to fit in so badly, was very much a, quote, mother hen type, and she just always wanted to look out for people. And they believe that Amanda used all of these factors to sort of pressure Shanda into a relationship. So what do you think? What do you think? I'm super curious to know what you think. It's definitely complicated, right? I know I would be uncomfortable if some 14-year-old was kind of talking and trying to hang out with my 12-year-old. I don't know, this is kind of weird. And I don't know, I'm trying to think back to when I was 14, and I don't think I would be hanging out with a 12-year-old. So for me, the biggest thing is the age gap. That is a little worrying. Shanda's 12. All right. I feel 12, maybe I'm a prude, but I feel 12 is a little young to be getting any type of sexual, intimate contact. But maybe that's just me. Super curious to know what you think. So moving on, of course, because these are teenage girls, even though they thought they were being slick, Melinda, of course, discovered Amanda and Shanda's relationship. And, of course, instantly grew jealous. Now, at first, she did try the diplomatic approach, and she wrote Shanda a note asking, why all three of them couldn't hang out together, and why all three of them couldn't just be friends. She told Shanda how Amanda was her girlfriend, and she didn't like that she spent all this alone time with her. However, this was to no avail because it did not deter Amanda and Shanda from secretly seeing each other. After seeing a heart-shaped note in Amanda's locker that said, quote, Shanda loves Amanda, Melinda confronted Shanda in the hallways of school. She pushed her up against the lockers, called Shanda a, quote, lying bitch when Shanda denied that she had written that note, and finally, after having enough, Melinda then confronted Amanda, and she told Amanda that they were through. But after a few days, Melinda had cooled down and had actually apologized, and her and Amanda had made up. And And when they made up, Amanda did promise to stop seeing Shanda, but that was an empty promise. Now, in early of October 1991, Amanda and Shanda actually attended a school dance together. Shanda had agreed to go as Amanda's date, so Amanda knew that Melinda hated dances and had plans to hang out with her friend, 17-year-old Carrie Pope, who was also gay and part of like a youth of LGBT kids who hung around together. And Amanda knew that the night of the dance, Melinda was going to hang out with Carrie. They had gotten some wine coolers. And they were gonna hang out. So Amanda thought this would be the perfect opportunity to have a nice secret date with Shanda. So as Melinda and Carrie were, hanging out and drinking on some wine coolers, Melinda begged Carrie to drive them to the dance because she wanted to know if Amanda was there with Shanda. Now, Carrie did try to resist because she knew that it was just going to be drams, there's no good that can come of this. But Melinda kept insisting, and so Carrie drove them to the school. So they stopped by the dance, and Melinda, of course, saw Shanda and Amanda together. Melinda immediately stalked up to them and confronted Shanda, warned her to stay away from Amanda. And I read a couple articles that said once Shanda and Amanda actually left the dance and were outside in the parking lot, Melinda slapped Amanda in the face. And I guess just kind of like went off on her in front of everyone. But this still did not deter Amanda and Shanda from seeing each other. They paid Melinda no mind and continued their relationship. Finally, a few days after the dance, Melinda rounded a corner at school, and saw Amanda and Shanda together. They were like whispering and, giggling together in the hallways, and they just looked all like cute and cozy together. And rather than cause another scene, Melinda just left and cried and decided that, her and Amanda were over. She just couldn't do this anymore. Which honestly, I don't get people who fight for cheaters. Like, I don't know. That's a deal breaker for me, cheating. So yeah, I personally don't get it. But yeah, Melinda had finally had enough. She told her sisters that she felt abandoned and betrayed by Amanda. And in an effort to cure their sister's broken heart, her sisters set her up, alright? Set her up with an 18-year-old girl named Carrie East. I'm not sure how much I approve of them setting their sister up with an 18-year-old, because remember, at this point, it's like 1991-ish, 1990, 1991. So Melinda's only like 16-ish or so. So I don't know how much I approve of that. But yeah, they were trying to cure their sister's broken heart. And so they set her up with Carrie East. Now, Melinda was hoping that Amanda would hear about this relationship and get jealous, and that this would cause her to come back. Meanwhile, Amanda and Shanda continued on with their relationship. Amanda would sleep over at Shanda's house, where unbeknownst to Jacqueline, I guess they were, sharing some sort of intimate contact, kissing and stuff. Now, Amanda was drawn to Shanda because of just how opposite she was of Melinda. Shanda was innocent, sweet, kind, was just beginning to discover her sexuality, didn't have the type of baggage that Melinda did. However, though Amanda seemed to be happy with Shanda, she obviously still had feelings for Amanda, because she instantly grew jealous when she heard that Melinda had a new girlfriend. Apparently, Amanda found out Carrie's phone number and started trying to harass her and call her and stuff. But remember, Carrie's 18 and she never paid Amanda no mind. But of course, Melinda was absolutely gleeful and happy that Amanda was jealous and was doing this, This was making Melinda very happy. Melinda got in contact with Amanda and told her hey, this thing with Carrie, it's just a fling. And that if you break your little thing off with Shanda, we can be together. I'll break off with Carrie and yeah, we can continue on. And Amanda agreed. She's like, okay, sounds good. But this was a lie. Yeah, Amanda was playing both sides. She was torn between Melinda and Shanda. Now, though Shanda may have been curious about her feelings for Amanda, I guess she did start kind of branching out and sort of making other friends. And I guess she even started talking and flirting with some other boys. And this apparently, grated on Amanda's nerves, and she started spending more time with Melinda. Even while at the same time, she's trying to write Shanda notes and kind of talk sweet talk to sort of woo her back. Later, in October of 1991, Shanda and Amanda actually attended a fall festival together. It was called Harvest Homecoming. And Amanda and Shanda had gone there together with Sharon and Steve, you know, Shanda's father and stepmother. Now, Steve and Sharon were unaware that Jacqueline at this point had forbidden Shanda from seeing Amanda. At this point, Jacqueline just did not really like Amanda. Remember, Amanda kind of had the same reputation as Melinda as just not being like, you know, one of the good ones and, you know, was like a rough type. And she had seen sort of like some minor changes in Shanda's behavior, which we will get into. And so, yeah, she at this point, when they attended this fall festival, Shanda was not supposed to be seeing Amanda anymore. Her mother had put her foot down. But Steve and Sharon were unaware of this. Now, Steve and Sharon had met Amanda once before they took her to this fall festival, and in her classic fashion, Amanda won them over. I guess she dressed more, you know, feminine and was, you know, very polite and put on her polite, quiet demeanor. And yeah, they really liked her. But on the night of the fall festival, when she showed up at their house, I guess they were, you know, aghast at her actual attire because she showed up in her usual tomboy getup, which I don't understand how, like, that disturbed them. They said that they also didn't like how she, quote, carried herself because she carried herself like a boy. But, I mean, whatever. It's early 90s in a conservative area. What's to be expected, right? Now, Melinda, she found out that Shanda and Amanda had attended this fall festival together. All right, she found out, and she was so pissed. She vented to a friend, 15-year-old Kirsty Broadfuhr, and she vented to Kirsty about how she wanted to teach Shanda a lesson. All right, she was really sick of this little girl disrupting her life, and she wanted to teach her a lesson. But Kirsty pointed out, like, girl, if you want to teach anyone a lesson, you need to teach Amanda the lesson, all right? She's the cheater here, all right? Not Shanda. Amanda is the one in a relationship with you. You need to be focusing your anger at her. And just real quick, yeah, why is it when people get cheated on, they want to, like, blame the person who their partner's cheating with? It's like, no, dude, you need to be blaming your partner too, all right? You need to be primarily blaming them because they're the one that's in a relationship with you, you know? So Christy points this out to Melinda. Melinda's like, you know what? You're totally right. And so the two girls concocted a plan where they were going to teach Amanda a lesson. Christy called Amanda and asked if she'd be, you know, interested in sneaking out one night. She was going to get a boy that she knew to drive her to Amanda's. And yeah, they'd pick Amanda up and they'd go hang out. Now, unbeknownst to Amanda, the real plan was to have Melinda hiding in this car and pounce on Amanda when she got in. And they were going to take Amanda to somewhere secluded and just kind of beat her up. But this plan hit several snags, all right? So from the get-go, all right, hit some snags. So the boy that Christy had called to give them a ride, he had brought along two buddies. So that was the first snag. That was not part of the plan. Then, on the way to Amanda's, the boys got word of a party that was happening nearby, and Christy heard that there was going to be cocaine there. And Christy was struggling with a cocaine addiction at this time, and so she was like, hey, let's go to this party instead. Now, Melinda was not interested in partying. She wanted to be clear-headed for, you know, what they were going to do to Amanda. And Christy was like, girl, the night's young. We've got plenty of time to party a little bit, and then, yeah, we'll go teach Amanda a lesson. And so they went to the party. Now, as the hours went by, Melinda got impatient, and she started begging Christy to go, who at that point was also ready to go because she was not getting her usual high with the cocaine that she had gotten at that party, and she suspected that it was just like baking soda cut with some speed or something. So she wasn't feeling too good either. And so they finally left. But by the time they got to Amanda's house and pounded on Amanda's window, it was pretty late, and Amanda was just passed out and was not stirring. The whole evening was ruined, and Melinda was furious. She was so mad. She decided that next time, not only was she going to choose her accomplices more carefully, it was going to be Shanda who was going to be taught the lesson, not Amanda. So all throughout this that I've been explaining, right, the love triangle going on and all that, Jacqueline, remember I noticed that we said that Jacqueline had noticed some behavioral changes in Shanda, hence why she had forbidden Shanda to hang out with Amanda. So let's get a little bit into that. So Jacqueline, she started noticing her daughter acting different, all right? She noticed that her daughter's bubbly personality was replaced with a more sullen, withdrawn, and detached one. Before, Shanda was always very outgoing, always wanted to do stuff. I mean, I told you about all the activities that she did at St. Paul's, but now she just wanted to shut herself off in her room, didn't want to do anything, didn't want to talk to anyone, and just seemed to really shut herself away. While she had always participated in sports and extracurriculars and done well in school, now Shanda, who had made the basketball team, was complaining about going to practice, and eventually she quit the team. She started failing her classes, and Jacqueline discovered that Amanda had shown Shanda how to forge her signature because there were, school progress reports and stuff whenever, Shanda got in trouble or when her grades slipped. And Amanda had showed Shanda how to forge her mother's signature, and that's what she had been signing those school progress reports with. Jacqueline noticed that whereas before Shanda was very much your stereotypical girly girl and very feminine with the way she dressed and presented herself, she did her hair and makeup. Now she was wearing baggy jeans and sweatshirts, didn't seem to be bothered to take care of her hair anymore, essentially dressing more and more like, Amanda. Now Jacqueline was concerned, but Paige, Shanda's older sister, she assured her mom that, like, what, just leave her alone. This is like the in style now. And, Shanda's she's in that phase of her life where she's discovering who she is. Just let it be. And by the way, all of this that I just explained to you, this change in Shanda's behavior and all that, this all happened in about a month. This was about a month span. Yeah, so pretty quickly. After Jacqueline had discovered the signature forgeries, she had driven down to the school, and her school counselor and Shanda all had a meeting. And this would actually be the first time Jacqueline would hear the name Melinda Loveless. Yeah, she had no idea. The counselor filled Jacqueline in on who Amanda and Melinda were and the reputation they had. The counselor told Shanda that she needed to stay away from these girls and fly right. Basically saying, they were bad seeds and, that, yada, yada, yada. And it was at this point that Jacqueline was like, Amanda's a bad influence on you. And so this is when she had forbidden Shanda to hang out with Amanda. And at this meeting, Shanda promised to stay away from Amanda and to focus on her studies and just, fly right. However, Shanda and Amanda would still be in communication and would still meet up. Amanda would call Shanda at home disguising her voice, or having other girls call, and then they would have like a three-way chat. Jacqueline caught Amanda several times because, come on, there's really not a lot of ways that you can disguise your voice as a 14-year-old. And she would tell Amanda every time to stop calling. Finally, after another disguised call from Amanda, Jacqueline went down to Amanda's father's home. Yeah, went down to Jerry's home. And she confronted him directly. He told her that every parent of every friend that Amanda had ever had come down to his house and said the exact same thing. That Amanda needed to stay away from their kid and that Amanda was a bad influence. And Jacqueline, I disagree with this line of framing here, but Jacqueline then asked Jerry, hey, did you notice how your daughter acts, how she dresses? Asked him how he noticed his daughter didn't act like a, quote, normal little girl. He said that he did ask Amanda if she had been gay, but she denied it. And he didn't know what to do at this point. Jacqueline then suggested that Amanda start dressing like a normal little girl, start acting like a little normal girl, and probably needed to spend some more time with her mother. Look, I get Jacqueline is upset. I get that she wants to, protect her child from this older girl, but let's call this out for what it is. It's bigotry and discrimination. Amanda has problems and issues, yes, but it's not because she's gay. Maybe it's because she feels like she can't come out. After this, Jerry promised that he would keep Amanda away from Shanda, and for a brief period of time, the calls did stop and Shanda's grades did improve. But one day, Jacqueline discovered that Shanda and Amanda were still in communication. They were still talking to each other. Shanda had wrote Amanda a letter, right, and had dropped it in the mail, but Shanda did not put a stamp on the letter, and so it got returned. And so when Jacqueline was checking her mail, she saw this letter and was like, what the heck? So she opened it, and inside was Shanda's school picture. On the back, Shanda had written, quote, Amanda, I miss you, and I will always love you no matter what happens. I miss the touch of your soft body. Needless to say, this was quite a shock to Jacqueline. I think not just the gay aspect of it, but I think the fact that her 12-year-old daughter apparently was having some sort of physical, intimate contact with someone, I think it kind of threw her. Jacqueline immediately called Steve and Sharon. Shanda was over at their home at that point, and she said that they needed to have a family intervention, a family meeting. Jacqueline informed Steve and Sharon of the situation, of everything that had been going on, and she then called Jerry, Amanda's father, and told him that he needed to bring Amanda over immediately because they all needed to have a conversation. She informed him of what had been going on, what she found, and she said, yeah, they needed to discuss their daughter's relationship, and so he needed to bring her over here now. But Jerry never showed up, and in fact, Jacqueline found out when she tried to call him that Jerry had actually had his phone number changed and had it changed to an unlisted private number. But that did not stop Jacqueline, Steve, and Sharon from confronting Shanda. So that evening, the three adults sat Shanda down and confronted Shanda over what Jacqueline had found and confronted her over Amanda's relationship. And poor Shanda was just in tears throughout this whole thing. This must have been one of the worst nights of her life. They, of course, wanted to get to the bottom of her relationship with Amanda. And look, this is early 90s, So let's remember the context here. I know it's frustrating, but I don't really blame Shanda for not opening up to them during this little intervention, this little talk that they had, because the way that they were framing it was stuff like, quote, whatever you've done is not unforgivable. And just sort of framing the whole topic of being gay as like, I don't know, something that like you could come back from, like something like the way that they framed it was like as if she had done something wrong. You know what I mean? And like maybe it's easy for, us here in 2022 to sort of call this behavior out. But at the time, yeah, I don't know if they just didn't know of any other way or what, but I don't know. When I read that in the book and like how they framed things and what they said to her, I don't really blame her for being super scared and terrified of saying anything. But to be fair to them, I think the primary concern for them, right, is that their 12-year-old was already having like sexual contact with someone. I think that was the main thing behind it. I know that would be my thing. Like, I don't care if my 12-year-old is like gay, straight, whatever. Like, I would be a little disturbed if my 12-year-old was already having sexual contact with someone. So yeah, I think that was like the primary concern. But yeah, all throughout this, Shanda just denied that her and Amanda were anything more than friends. She said the message on the back of the picture was just a quote joke. Now, unable to get Shanda to open up, when Shanda went to bed, the parents all had a discussion, and they decided that they were going to enroll Shanda into a new school, and Steve was even going to increase his child support payments so that they could afford it. And apparently Shanda was not happy about this decision, was not happy about, having a say in it, and was, not too thrilled. And in late November of 1991, Shanda started at the Our Lady of Perpetual Help Catholic School, and this was in New Albany. Now, it is said within months of transferring to Our Lady that Shanda's old personality just came back. She had started to act like her old self again. She had started making new friends and had even wanted to try out for the cheerleading team. She had joined the basketball team, and it seemed like, she was back to her old self. Now, when she heard that Shanda had been transferred, Melinda was, of course, on cloud nine. Like, her romantic rival was now gone, and she had Amanda all to herself. So things were totally peachy for her right now. And through the notes that she wrote to Amanda during the time that Shanda was transferred, Melinda just expresses how happy she is. Her, expresses her feelings for Amanda, like kind of like typical cringy 14, 15-year-old romantic love stuff. However, unbeknownst to Amanda was still in communication with Shanda. So in her first few days and weeks at her new school, Shanda found it hard to adjust, at first. And she had gravitated back toward Amanda. They had found ways to secretly communicate via the phone and had even made plans for a secret meetup. Shanda was going to stay with her cousin, and the plan was for her and her cousin to go to a dance at Hazelwood, and Amanda would just so happen to be there. But this didn't pan out because Melinda discovered the secret plan, discovered that Amanda was secretly communicating with Shanda, and in the parking lot of that dance, the night of the secret meetup, Melinda confronted Shanda and Amanda, and Shanda's cousin was also there, and Melinda made Amanda choose right then and there who she wanted, her or Shanda. And Amanda told Shanda to, quote, get lost, and that she didn't like her anymore. And I guess Shanda ran off crying, and her cousin, went running after her. And in a note dated a few days after this incident, it was dated November 26th, Melinda wrote Amanda and expressed how angry she was at this whole thing. She said, quote, I'm real mad at you. I feel like I need to cry. I want Shanda dead. Now, Jerry, Amanda's father, right, he found these notes that Melinda and Amanda had been exchanging, and he was really disturbed by some of the intimate details that they revealed. And he actually went down to the police. And I guess the police then informed Melinda that if she didn't leave Amanda alone, that she could face charges in juvenile court and that she needed to stay away from her. And of course, this really pissed Melinda off. She was so angry at this. And of course, who do you think she blamed for all of this? Shanda. She would tell anyone that would listen that she wanted Shanda dead, all right? She couldn't stand her. She had even asked a friend how to dispose of a body, to which the friend coldly replied that you put the body in a barrel full of leaves and light it on fire. Now, unbeknownst to Melinda, all right, that night in the parking lot where she made Amanda choose between them, that was actually a critical turning point in Amanda and Shanda's relationship. So, though Amanda called Shanda and apologized for it, all right, and just apologized for the whole thing, Shanda at that point was just kind of over it, she'd had enough. She was starting to make new friends at school, was starting to kind of vibe with this new school and culture she was in, and she she didn't really have time for Amanda anymore. You know what I mean? You know, she had joined the basketball team, was getting into extracurriculars again, and she had even started, like, talking with a boy at her school. And it said that, like, she spent hours on the phone with him. So she was, you know, she was diving into her new life. Amanda would call, write Shanda letters, and try to contact her however she could. But yeah, Shanda eventually just kind of drifted away, you know? Shanda even told her mother that if certain girls called, that her mother should just hang up on them because that was actually Amanda trying to get in contact with her. So yeah, Shanda wanted to make a clean break. When Amanda called Shanda's house, Christmas time, 1991, she wanted to wish Shanda a Merry Christmas. Jacqueline wouldn't let her and told Amanda to just never call again. Amanda denied being a lesbian. Jacqueline said that she didn't care what Amanda was. She couldn't hang out with Shanda anymore and that she just needed to stay away. And she hung up on her. As she was, you know, withdrawing from Amanda and diving into her new life, Shanda was getting frustrated with Amanda's numerous attempts to try to contact her. Shanda apparently wrote a note to one of her new friends at her new school, and it was dated January 2nd, 1992, so not long after the Christmas incident. And it read, quote, "I can't take all this pressure. I wish she would stop calling me and following me." So yeah, it was getting pretty obvious that Shanda was ready to break free of Amanda. And of course, Melinda found out that Amanda was trying to contact Shanda, and of course, what do you think? Of course, this like made her angry. Now at school, angry about just this whole love triangle, the whole thing, Melinda started hanging out. Remember I said earlier there was a group of LGBT youth that kind of hung out in the area? Melinda started hanging out with this crowd more, all right? As she was growing more and more frustrated with everything, she started hanging out with this crowd of people more. And this was the group that she had met through Carrie Pope, remember? So yeah, she's hanging out with them. And in this new group, there was also a pair of twin brothers, Larry and Terry Leatherberry. Yes, those are real names. And they were bisexual brothers who lived in an apartment together in Louisville. And they also had a fascination with the occult. And it was through the Leatherberry brothers that Melinda was introduced to another friend. This was an older girl, and her name was Laurie Tackett. And she was introduced to Laurie in late November 1991. So right around this time where Shanda's being transferred, Amanda's trying to get in contact with her, but Shanda ain't having it. So it's like right around the same time that all this is happening that Melinda meets Laurie. And by December, the next month, the girls were spending a lot of time together. So remember when I said that there's like 6 main people in this case that we're going to go over? Well, we've gone over 3, right? Shanda, Amanda, and Melinda. Well, let's get into Laurie, all right? Because Laurie has a lot to do with this case as well. So Laurie was born Mary Lorraine Laurie Tackett on October 5th, 1974 in Madison, Indiana. Her mother, Peggy Tackett, was a fundamentalist Pentecostal Christian, and she was part of like a cult/church called Lighthouse on the Hill. Now, in this fundamentalist religion, in this sect, women are not allowed to wear pants. They're not allowed to wear makeup or shorts. They can only wear ankle-length skirts. And, of course, Laurie and her siblings were raised in this. Laurie was not even allowed to take PE courses in school because she was not allowed to change into sweat shorts. Peggy also worked part-time at a bakery. Laurie's father was George Tackett. Now, he was not a part of his wife's religion, and he was a factory worker with 2 prior felony convictions, and this was for robbery in the 1960s. Laurie also had a younger brother named Buddy. Now, it is said Peggy, you know, Laurie's mother, dominated the household. She forced her children to adhere to her religious beliefs. Like I said, Buddy and Laurie were raised in the religion and forced to adhere to it. Peggy got rid of the family's TV because she said that she had made a vow to God, all right? And the only music allowed in the house were gospel hymns. No other music was allowed. Laurie says that she was molested at least twice as a child, and this was between the ages of 5 and 12 years old. I'm not sure if there's anything else about that. That is just what Laurie has said. Now, in May of 1989, Peggy discovered that Laurie was rebelling. Right? She was rebelling against her fundamentalist upbringing. Peggy found out that Laurie had been secretly changing into, like normal clothes at school. She was sneaking normal clothes like pants and stuff into her backpack and then changing at school and then changing back before she got home. And as she, started getting away with this, she started dressing more and more provocatively and stuff. And as her rebellion grew, she started attracting male attention and she started to become sexually active. And it is said that when Peggy confronted her daughter about this, she attempted to strangle her. Yeah, she attempted to strangle her own daughter just because her daughter was wearing skirts. This incident apparently caused social services to be involved, and Laurie's parents had to then agree to unannounced visits from CPS so that they could ensure no child abuse was going on. Laurie and Peggy would continuously butt heads all throughout Laurie growing up, and one day, Buddy, her little brother, he snuck into his sister's room and read her diary, and in it, Laurie had expressed how much she resented her family, how much she hated them, how she didn't believe in God, how she had homosexual urges, and how she wished that she had been born a boy instead of a girl. Now, Buddy, of course, told their mother, Peggy, who then chastised her daughter, chastised her for not being, quote, normal, and she ended up taking her to church to listen to a sermon by a preacher who, of course, all throughout was preaching directly at Laurie and was telling her that, being gay would send her to hell and that, it was evil, the typical BS. But yeah, this did not stop Laurie from rebelling. And in fact, like, if I had known Peggy, I'd be like, girl, do you realize the more that you push against this, the more that your daughter is just going to rebel against you? Like, do you realize that? In fact, one time, Peggy, Laurie's mom, went over to one of Laurie's friends' homes. She'd found out that this friend's father had bought them a Ouija board to play with, and Peggy was outraged. All right, she was outraged. She marched over to the house and demanded that the family take away the Ouija board and burn it. And she demanded that the whole house had to be exorcised. Oh, and I did not name Laurie's friend. This was Laurie's friend, Hope Rippy. All right. And yeah, she had gone over to Hope's house and demanded that her father burn the Ouija board that he had bought her. And we will get a little bit more into Hope in just a moment. So, the relationship with her mother would just worsen as Laurie got older. And I guess Laurie's rebelliousness really ramped up when Laurie turned 15. This is also when Laurie developed an obsession with the occult. Again, probably in rebellion to her mother. She's rebelling in every way that you can. And this is when Laurie started hanging out with the Leatherberries and that whole group. She began getting into hardcore music, grew an obsession with fire. She talked about drinking blood and would attend seances and stuff that Larry and Terry would put on, because Larry and Terry, not only were they fascinated with the occult and all that, they actually believed it, right? They were true believers. And so they would have seances and stuff, and Laurie would attend these. She dyed her hair wild colors, wore ostentatious makeup, cut off all of her hair in favor of a boy cut, even shaving her head at one point. She wore all black and just really seemed to enjoy shocking people, particularly the stuffy, fundamentalist religious types that her mother had subjected her to her entire childhood and life. She really seemed to enjoy, shocking these kind of people. I think we would probably describe her as an edgelord today. So I mentioned this earlier, Laurie had slept with some boys. She did become sexually active early, and she had even slept with one of the Leatherberry brothers. I believe it was Larry. But, as Laurie progressed sexually and got older, she discovered that she kind of had an attraction to girls. She dated one girl in Madison, and it was this relationship that convinced Laurie that she was gay and not bisexual. I think Laurie was very in love with this girl, but this girl moved away and it just broke her heart. Laurie did also practice self-harm and self-mutilation. I guess she had started when she began hanging out with this new group of friends and when they were doing their seances and stuff, And on March 19th, 1991, she actually cut her wrist so deeply she was hospitalized. And here, the staff suspected an attempted suicide and actually admitted her to a mental institution for several weeks. And I don't know if it was at this time, but at some point, Laurie's parents did discover her homosexuality. And it is said that Peggy tried to perform an exorcism on her. At the hospital, when she was under evaluation, it said she was prescribed an antidepressant, and then she was eventually discharged. However, only 2 days later, Laurie cut her wrist so deeply, she was readmitted to the hospital. After she was treated, she was admitted to the psychiatric ward, and here it is said she was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. At this time, Laurie also admitted to doctors that she had hallucinations, and she had had them since she was a very young child, and she was ultimately discharged from the psychiatric ward on April 12th, and she ended up running away from home that summer. So just a couple months later, she ended up running away from home. She worked a series of minimum wage jobs, even dated a boy named Aaron Hall, but I guess after he discovered that she had cheated on him with a girl named Danielle, he broke up with her. And I guess in retaliation, Laurie attempted to run him over with her car, and she tried diving into a relationship with Danielle, but Danielle moved away. And this caused Laurie to fall into a deep depression. She dropped out of high school in September of that year at almost 17 years years old. Laurie continued to stay in Louisville all throughout October, and she would stay with friends. And in early December, after failing to maintain a job, Laurie moved back home in Madison. Her father bought her a 7-year-old 4-door sedan, and Laurie got a job at the local Kmart. But Laurie hated her job, hated Madison, hated everything, and she actually would often spend most of her time in Louisville and New Albany with her new group of friends. At this point, even these friends were kind of getting tired of Laurie's whole shtick. Even for them, Laurie was becoming a little too weird. She would talk about a dream she had where charred, mutilated infants were hanging from trees. She said she would enjoy killing someone due to the publicity she would receive. She wondered aloud what it would be like to put a knife through someone's stomach and push it in. And she spoke about how she wanted to watch someone burn to death. She even offered to kill Carrie's grandmother. Remember Carrie Pope? She's part of this group. She offered to kill her grandmother when Carrie was feuding with her. Remember I said that the Leatherberry brothers really took like their occult and like all that seriously, like it was like an actual religion to them. And I remember how I said that they would have seances and stuff. Well, at these seances and stuff, I guess Laurie would always try to, like, upstage Larry, and she would act like she was going into a, quote, trance. Like, at these seances, she would change her voice, and then she would pretend to be possessed by a spirit, and she called the spirit Deanna the Vampire. She claimed that she could bring people back from the dead, and again reiterated how she wanted to kill someone. Though later, Laurie would deny that she had done any of this. Now, as a result, the whole group began distancing themselves from Laurie, alright? And as they were doing that, this left kind of Melinda the only one that was still sort of hanging out with her. Now, Melinda was weary of Laurie, quote, the weird girl, because of what Larry, Terry, and Carrie were saying about her. But she did marvel at just how little F's Laurie gave. She really marveled at that and just really loved that Laurie didn't care what anyone thought. But in actuality, Laurie is a little girl who very, very much cares what people think. That's why she was trying so much to be, you know, like an edgelord and stuff with her group of friends. She wanted to impress them, you know? She was that girl that tried too hard. But yeah, to Melinda, she bought the facade that Laurie gave off that she didn't actually care. Melinda was also well aware of Laurie's penchant for violence, you know? Something that they had in common. By late December, Laurie was spending all of her time with Melinda and was determined to keep this friendship because, yeah, a lot of other people had distanced themselves from her. Laurie found Melinda intimidatingly beautiful and listened intently as Melinda would just go on and on about her torrid love triangle with Amanda and Shanda. And now let's get into Hope. Remember Laurie's friend whose father bought her the Ouija board and like Laurie's mom wanted them to like burn it and stuff. So let's get a little bit into her because Hope is the fifth person involved in this, all right? So Hope Anna Rippey, she was born on June 9th, 1976 in Madison, Indiana. Her mother, Gloria, was a housewife, and her father, Carl, was an engineer at the Clifty Falls power plant. Hope had two older brothers named John and Dan, and she also had an older sister named Tina. Yeah, Hope was the baby. Now, Hope had met Laurie in grade school, and when other kids were making fun of Laurie for being, you know, quote, weird girl, because, you know, that's how far back that behavior had gone, Hope befriended Laurie and was always happy to lend a sympathetic ear. It is said that Hope was really there for Laurie as she was struggling with her relationship with her mother as she was growing up. Hope's parents divorced in February of 1984, and she, along with her siblings, except for her older brother John, they moved to Quincy, Michigan. And she would be here for 3 years. John, the older brother, had stayed behind with their father. Hope has said that life in Michigan was turbulent, and in 1987, they moved back. Hope's parents had gotten back together for the sake of the children, though they never remarried. But they did make a pact not to argue in front of the children and to do their best to co-parent and raise their children together. And at this point, the family had all moved back in together in Madison. There were still incidents of violence in Hope's upbringing, though. Apparently, John and Dan would have pretty, like, physical, hardcore fistfights, often in front of Hope. In junior high, Hope was on the track team, the basketball team, and even played in the school band. Apparently, Hope was very musically gifted. She could, like, play a song on the piano after only listening to it for, like, a couple of times. She had a really good ear. And by the time she entered Madison Consolidated High School, she had dropped all of her athletic extracurriculars and had dropped out of band. Her older sister Tina had gotten pregnant in high school, so I guess it wasn't too much of a surprise that Hope also began being sexually active at a pretty early age. And by the time that she was a sophomore in high school, she had had sex with a number of boys. And I guess she had kind of developed into like this feisty, rebellious teen, kind of had that reputation reputation. Apparently she had even organized a school walkout over some policy the district had passed that she didn't agree with. And yeah, so she kind of grew this feisty, rebellious sort of reputation among her peers. She soon gained popularity with sort of the rebellious crowd. Hope was never really part of that in mainstream popular crowd. But, she cursed, she smoked, she liked to hang out at the pool hall and play pool and kind of get with boys. But she did have a group of friends. And when the family had relocated from Michigan back to Madison, that is when Hope was reintroduced to Laurie and they hooked back up. Now, Hope's parents did not really like Laurie, and they only tolerated her daughter's friendship with her. They thought Laurie was a bad influence, didn't like her outward boyish appearance. Now, it is said Hope was aware of Laurie's sexuality. However, Hope herself was straight, and I guess she never let the fact that Laurie was gay interfere with their friendship. She didn't care. Now, Hope's parents would have much preferred that Hope hang out with her other childhood friend that she had known since kindergarten, Toni Lawrence. The two were never best friends, but good friends, and again had, gone to school all throughout their childhood together. However, as they had entered high school, Toni had grown more, quote, preppy, and so they did sort of drift apart a little bit. However, Toni did like to shoot pool and she liked to hang out with guys. So Hope and Toni, they did still hang out together, even though they kind of ran with different crowds. And we will get into our sixth and final person, Toni Lawrence, Hope's friend, all right? So Toni Lawrence was born on February 14th, 1976 in Madison, Indiana. Her parents were Glenda and Clifton Lawrence, and Toni was the youngest of 3 daughters. Clifton was a boilermaker, though an injury then forced him to rely on his pension. And Toni lived with her parents and one of her sisters not far from Hope. I think her other sister had moved out of the house. Now, Toni's home life has not been described as chaotic or turbulent as some of the other girls. It said she came from a loving and caring family. She was very middle class, was described as a wallflower, very timid. She wrote lots of poetry, and, enjoyed doing the same things that most teenage girls her age did. Shopping, talking on the phone, going to the movies and all that. However, though it is said that her upbringing wasn't, as traumatic or abusive as some of the other girls, it is said at the age of 9 years old, Toni was abused by a family member, and at 14 years old, she was sexually assaulted by a boy. And this was while she was at her friend's house. She did not report this assault, and her parents only found out about it because her mom had found a note that Toni had written to one of her friends where she talked about the assault and named the boy who had assaulted her. The Lawrences did try getting this boy punished, but, this is America. Come on. You think sexual assault is punished? Nah. All that happened was that he was told that he had to stay away from Toni. So that's all that was done to him. Yeah, even though her parents tried really hard to get something done, all that was done was that he had to stay away from Toni. Toni went into counseling following this incident, but it said she didn't really follow through. Furthermore, word got around school of what happened, and what do you think? People actually took the boy's side, saying that Toni asked for it, and she shouldn't have asked for it. Yeah. So frustrating. Toni began to withdraw into herself. She became depressed. However, to the outside, Toni seemed to be coping. She was good at putting on a front. She also attended Madison Consolidated High School, along with Laurie and Hope. She was well-behaved, had average grades, so on the outside, she seemed kind of fine, right? She was coping. She did eventually find a boyfriend, and she did kind of come out of her shell a little bit. However, he ended up cheating on her, and she dropped him like a sack of potatoes. And it was around this time, when she's kind of depressed and, got rid of the loser who cheated on her, that she started hanging out with Hope more and more. And it was Hope who actually introduced Toni to Laurie, who Toni, at first, like many, thought was strange. She thought Laurie was a little weird. But during this, really turbulent time in her life, Laurie's philosophy started to rub off on Toni. And, she started to think that Laurie wasn't really all that bad. Maybe there's something to this, not giving an F. One time, Toni asked Laurie to spend the night, and in her room, Laurie showed Toni how she would mutilate herself. She said that she relieved stress and relieved stuff by doing self-harm. But this went disastrously wrong, and Laurie cut too deep, and she actually had to be rushed to the hospital. I'm a little unclear if this was one of the incidents that I had described to you earlier, where she was admitted to the hospital. I was a little confused if this was one of those incidents. But she cut too deep, had to be rushed to the hospital. And after this, Toni's parents did not approve of her hanging out with Laurie. And Toni thought that they were onto something. So she's like, you know what? I'm gonna keep her at arm's length. Now, let's go to the date, January 8th, 1992, all right? Laurie called up Melinda and invited her over to a concert that Friday. Now, Melinda had tried calling around and getting some of her friends to come with her on this, but once anyone heard that Laurie was coming, they were like, yeah, no. When Melinda called Laurie back to say that, like, hey, she was down, but this trip tonight, it had to include a trip to Shanda's. She wanted to lure Shanda out of the house and kill her. And this is what she told Laurie. Laurie said that this could be done, and she agreed to do whatever Melinda wanted. Laurie also told Melinda that she had managed to get 2 people to tag along, and that was Hope and Toni. Now, when asked if she thought that they would be in on the plan, Laurie was like, oh yeah, totally, no worries, they're totally down. But in actuality, she was kind of hesitant on Toni, who, she thought was like preppy and skittish. But she told Melinda, yeah, of course, they're totally going to be down. But Laurie did inform Hope of what the plan that evening was, and Hope seemed to be down, and it was agreed that nobody would tell Toni what the real purpose of that night was, because, yeah, she wouldn't go along with it. It had actually been Hope herself who had been the one to invite Toni that evening, and yeah, she had purposely omitted any mention of Shanda or this other side trip they were going to take. And both Hope and Toni lied to their parents in order to get out of the house to go. Toni's mom had initially said no because she didn't want Toni going all the way out to Louisville that late, and especially didn't like Laurie and was like, yeah, no, you're not going that far with that little weird girl. And Hope's parents had also said no. However, they had done just, the old switcheroo where they say, oh, I'm actually going to stay the night at this friend's house, and then the friend covers for them. So that's what they did. And that's how Toni and Hope got out that evening. And that is where we are going to end part 1. All right, that was a lot of setup. I know that's a lot of people that are involved in this whole thing. All right, guys, there was a lot I had to go over. And again, when I was reading the book for this case, there was just a lot of details about these girls' backgrounds that I was not aware of, and just wanted to talk about it and mention it, So next week, we will meet up for part 2, where we're going to get into the night of the concert, guys. We're going to get into the night of the plan, and yeah, just buckle up. It's going to be an intense one. It's going to be a really rough one, because I know we're talking about, like, sexuality and having sexual intimate experiences, but Shanda is only 12 years old. All right, 12 years old, and it's just so awful what happens to her. So we will meet back here next week for part 2. Until we meet again next week, I hope you take care of yourself out there. Remember, just don't be a dick, dude. Even if things are so rough on you and you're so angry at the world, I get it, but don't take that anger out on other people, Honestly, just smiling at someone, just being decent, could just make someone's whole day, could turn their whole day around, their whole attitude around, all right? Well, I will get out of here. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today and hearing me talk. I know this was another long one. Again, there's a lot of information here. All right, y'all, that'll do it for Crime Dive this week. I will see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye. Whoops, real quick before I actually let you go, wanted to give another shout out to Heather Petty. Thank you again for recommending this case, Heather. Thank you so much. Alrighty, guys. Forgot to give you another shout out at the end there. So, alright, now I will go ahead and let you go. Alright, bye-bye.